Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. So, a wildcard video for Game Week 5. And even if you're not wildcarding, hopefully it helps you out with your free transfer thoughts moving forward. All the charts are my own that I create. And if it does help you out, please do consider subscribing and liking the video. It really does make a difference. And I am closing in on 500 subscribers, which considering I don't tell anyone that I know, I have this channel because I wanted all the growth to be organic would be a really cool milestone. So any extra support really would be appreciated. Let's take a look at the team, and we're going to start in goal with David Raya. And you might look at this pick and say he's got Man City and Newcastle in his next two. Why on earth are you getting David Raya in? He's probably not going to keep clean sheets in those games. And the reason for that is that if you are using your wildcard at this stage of the season, you have to look at the mid to long term. You can't just look at the next 2 weeks because you're not going to have that same flexibility of transfers until about game week 16, 17, 18, where we get those extra transfers for the Africa Cup of Nations and you get access to your second wildcard for the second half of the season. So you're not going to want to make a goalkeeper transfer. You're going to have to be happy with this goalkeeper up until then. So you have to ignore the short term. Raya is the cheapest way into the Arsenal defence. And whilst he's the most expensive goalkeeper, I think it is worth considering that he's not that much more expensive than the rest. When you take a look at the midfielders and the forwards, the premium players in those areas, you have to find so much more money. You're only really finding 500,000 to 1 million max more than other goalkeepers to get Raya in. When we take a look at the chart, we can see we're comparing saves per game versus goals conceded. So any goalkeeper above this line is averaging more than 3 saves per game. So you know that they're going to get those extra points each week that will just help top up your score. When you take a look at goals conceded, the fewer goals conceded, so the goalkeepers on the left, are more likely to be keeping clean sheets. Let's take a look at Raya here. He's pretty much the second best goalkeeper at this stage of the season, and I do anticipate him scoring more points than Vicario over the longer term. There is such a high chance that he will be in the top three goalkeepers by the end of the season. You absolutely know what you're getting. Now, all of these charts, they do just contain data from the first 3 game weeks because we're only halfway through game week 4, and I didn't want to give an unfair advantage or maybe distort the data to make it less accurate by including half of the data from game week 4. I wanted to just make sure all the goalkeepers and all the players in all the charts were on a level playing field. Feel free to pause the video at any point as well, just to look at the charts in more detail and try and find certain players. But we're going to move on to the defenders, and I've highlighted Fabian Schär here. I do think he is a great defender to get. Newcastle are looking really solid, and whilst the defenders in general are at a premium price, I think all of them are worth the money. You know, you take a look at a Mark Gahey and a Senesi here, and they're not super cheap. They are cheap, but at 4.6 million each, one of them might potentially be out of reach for your team. Whenever we're picking a team, we're always zero point 0.1 million or zero point 0.2 million short of a player that we really want. So that is something to bear in mind when selecting your defenders because the price ranges are moving about a little bit now. And at the start of the season, they were 4.5 and we're looking to try and get them in. Now they're 4.6. You might need to just consider reducing your value in players higher up the pitch if you wanted both of them in. When we take a look at the chart, we're comparing goals conceded versus points per game. Now, I found this a really interesting chart because if your defender is scoring a lot of points, but they're still conceding goals, it means that a lot of their points that they're getting from defensive contributions or attacking returns. And if they were to get clean sheets as well, you'd be looking at massive point scores. So we'll take a look at Senesi here, someone who's conceded 4 goals in his opening 3 games is still averaging 8 points per game. You imagine that keeps clean sheets on top of that, he'd be way above everybody else in this chart. So whilst he is becoming a more popular player in FPL and he's moved up in price as a result, I definitely don't think it's too late to get on him. if you're looking for sort of the next best defenders, I really would recommend getting a player from this circle here. Again, these are the players who are conceding some goals in their first three games, but are still managing to average about 5 points per game through defensive contributions. Maybe they've got an attacking return in there as well, maybe some bonus points on top of that. So they might have had some difficult fixtures in their first 3 weeks. Maybe those fixtures are going to change and they're now going to get clean sheets as well. And there'll be double digit returns for most of that time if they are also keeping clean sheets. And the defensive contributions, they're also going to be consistently there or thereabouts for all season long. So that's where, if you're looking at a free transfer, I would consider those players. I did just think this was quite a cool chart to look at where defenders were getting their points from. So into midfield, and I've highlighted Enzo Fernandez here. Chelsea, they do have some tricky fixtures. They are away at Man United, which doesn't seem too bad. But when you consider that they've just been away in the league at Brentford and they've got some away games in Europe in between, it does mean they've got 4 away games in a row in all competitions. And that is something to be aware of when you're picking players. Now that European football is starting, are they on the road a lot? Are they traveling a lot? For someone like Enzo, I don't think it really matters. Him and Caicedo in the Chelsea midfield pretty much set and forget for 90 minutes each game week. He is also Chelsea captain and he's on some set pieces. I think all around, he's a really good pick, especially when you consider other Chelsea attackers, especially out wide, are at real rotation risk. Having someone that can play in your team week in and week out is so valuable, especially now we've got some injuries. And if you've had, a Sa or a Strand Larsen in your team and you want to keep hold of them and a bench player is coming in, there's a chance that you look at your bench players and you think, I don't really want them to come in at all. Enzo is a great price that some weeks he can be on your bench, some weeks he can start depending on fixtures, but you know at least he's going to play and he's got a high chance of contributing compared to some of the bench players you currently have. I also think we're looking at Gakpo Salah double up in midfield. I don't hate that. I actually think Isaac and Ekitike are probably going to rotate around each other's minutes and take minutes off each other. I think Gakpo should be good to start most game weeks, and we know how consistent Mo Salah is. So Menu's in there as well. I think if you don't have him already, it's not too late. Even though he's gone up in price, if he was priced at that, 7.5 million range at the start of the season and he was still there, I still would think he is a good pick. So when we take a look at the charts for midfielders, we're looking at goal contributions and defensive contributions. So these players who are doing it all, can they get you defensive points? Can they get you attacking points? Anyone to the right of this line is really doing both of that. So we can see Enzo at the top for goal contributions. And again, like all the other charts, this is just for the first 3 game weeks. So you can see Zubimendi at the bottom of the chart there. He got 2 goals yesterday, so he will be above that line now. So I think you just have a look at the players and try and factor in yourselves, if you can, where they would be based on more goal contributions that they had, or possibly more defensive contributions as well. So if you're looking for Caicedo, Bruno Fernandes, these players are getting more defensive contributions, not quite as attacking. So someone in the middle of this chart, maybe a Gakpo, a Grealish, a Semenyo, doing really well on both sides, and I would recommend them in your teams. But it is just an interesting chart, I thought, just to compare the attacking and defensive balance. And if you can find a midfielder who has good fixtures and is going to get you points on both sides of the ball, then I think that is a really good pick for the future. So let's take a look at the strikers, and an interesting one here in the sense that I've gone for Evan Nielsen. The Bournemouth double up isn't necessary. It's definitely not. And if you were to pick one of them, I would go for Semenyo. I think now that Voldemada from Newcastle is starting and he scored yesterday, and Newcastle looked really good, really attacking and good quick play, and he was involved in a lot of the link up. So if you didn't want a Bournemouth double up, I would 100% be okay with swapping Evan Nielsen to Voldemada and just getting on that Newcastle striker earlier than everybody else. Elsewhere, Gyökeres and João Pedro kind of speak for themselves. We spoke about Arsenal's sort of fixture swing. in a few game weeks. I think getting on Gyökeres now is absolutely fine. And João Pedro is just one of those strikers that even if you're getting on him to avoid losing out on points and protecting your rank, that is fine as well. When we take a look at the charts, we've got goal contributions for forwards who are priced at 6.4 million plus, and how many teams have selected them. So, how many FPL managers own them already? We can see that these three strikers are quite varied. João Pedro is the highest owned player. Like I just said, I am absolutely fine with you getting João Pedro in just to protect your rank. I did that myself for my own team this game week. And really, I looked at the players that I didn't own and thought, who is the player that, if they did score a lot, will hurt my team the most? And it is João Pedro, just because he's owned by so many managers and he is getting a lot of goal contributions. All three of these forwards got a goal contribution yesterday. So if you were to include that in these charts, they'd all be a little bit higher up than they are right now. Evan Nielsen is that differential pick. And if you were a bit priced out of Semenyo, I think he's a good player. But Voldemada is an exciting option that you could get in instead. And Gyökeres is someone who is playing up front for Arsenal. It looks like he's going to play every minute of every game or there or thereabouts. And, Havertz and Gabriel Jesus, they're not coming back into the lineup anytime soon. So there's absolutely no reason to be worried about a rotation risk. So when we take a look at the team overall, it's 96% rated, which is a fantastic rating. But absolutely just go with your gut as well. If you like a player and the data doesn't necessarily say that they're going to be any good, but you've taken a look and you think they'll do well, that is absolutely great. That's what FPL should be about, and definitely concentrate on that rather than trying to get a 100% rating. But websites like Fantasy Football Hub, they are useful as well, just to check that you're on the right track. The value is 100 million, and if you're already owned a Gakpo, a Pedro, a Semenyo, say, players that have already gone up in price, then you should be able to easily afford this. But at least this is a team that hopefully everyone can still afford, unless your squad has dropped in price quite a lot. The strengths for me are it gets ahead of the fixture swings. We talked about Raya and Gyökeres having some good fixtures in a few game weeks. If you get those players in now, think if you're wildcarding, you need to, because you can get ahead of the curve of everybody else. And in a few game weeks, you might say, well, I want to get these players in. I'll just use my free transfers. In 3 game weeks, look how we are in game week 4 and 5 now, 4 game weeks into the season, how many injuries we have. We can't take anything for granted. So if you want these players in a few game weeks and you're wildcarding, you pretty much have to get them in now. And the strength is that it tackles any injury issues. So it does solve those injuries you have. If you've got a Ishmael Assar, a Marmoush, a Strand Larsen, like I did in my own team, if I was wildcarding, it automatically sorts all of that out. Also, if you've got a Wan Bissaka, someone who's fallen out of the starting lineup in their own team, it deals with that situation as well. However, the weaknesses are that it does limit future flexibility. So you might have these same issues, injuries and rotation risks, in 5 game weeks' time, and you can't wildcard then. So I would just double check if there is a better time in the season to wildcard, because you'll be sat watching content creators and hearing people talking about how they're going to use their wildcard. If you've already used yours, you're just going to have to sit there and take it, really. You can't avoid it. And if that's going to be you and you're going to be frustrated at that point, I would just double check and look at the schedule as to whether there is a better time to do so. And it does offer some tough first games. So, you know, Arsenal at home to Man City isn't easy. Liverpool at home to Everton is a Merseyside derby and anything can happen. We've spoken as well about the Chelsea players with their away games. So I think it is slightly risky. But the bench is good enough in order to handle any rotation. And if you're not sure about a player starting, I would not have a problem bringing in Reinders or Senesi off the bench for game week 5 in order to counteract those potential issues. So let me know what you think about the team. Let me know if you think there's anyone else that you should get in. Any questions you've got, just let me know in the comments. And likewise, if you want me to create any charts showing anything that would help out your team, I'm more than happy to try and do it going into the preview videos for Game Week 5. So please do subscribe if you're new around here. It really does make a difference. Hopefully, you're having a good game week, and I will see you in the next one.